Today I'm going to feature one of the best soul singers that you've never heard of. His name is Courtney. We're going to dive into his recordings right here on Pop Goes the 60s. Courtney is one of the few successful artists to follow James Brown into the world of funk into the mid to late 60s. And before he got there, he had a string of unsuccessful singles, and then he had this one great album in about 1967 that really put him on the map. Born in Buffalo, New York in 1943 as Louis Pegues, he changed his name to Courtney when he started writing songs, and he started to get work right away. He wrote some songs for Chubby Checker and a hit for Mary Wells called Ain't It the Truth.
Now ain't it the truth now, baby? You heard indeed.
He was also doing some of his own singles at this time that were more gospel influenced and soulful, and none of these charted. One of them is called Come On Home. That's this one here on Imperial, and the B-side is called The Man with a Cigar, which is a favorite of mine. This was later covered by Herman's Hermits on the B-side of A Must to Avoid. So another very obscure single that he recorded at this time is called Professional Lover, and he was still on Imperial at this time. And he also met another guy, Dennis Lambert, who became his writing partner as well. And Lambert, you may recognize that name. He went on to write other great hits or co-write hits such as Don't Pull Your Love with Hamilton, Joe Frank and Reynolds, Ain't No Woman Like the One I Got by the Four Tops, Night Shift by the Commodores, and We Built This City by Starship.
I don't wanna walk down the street, clean as I can be for the fun of it. No, I don't, and I don't wear the best.
So these singles didn't chart, and though they were aimed at a pop audience, they were probably a little bit too soulful. So he and Lambert continued to write songs for other people. For instance, like Leslie Gore. They wrote a song for the McCoys called Up and Down. They wrote a great song for the Nashville Teens called Find My Way Home, and the big hit by Freddie and the Dreamers, Do the Freddie.
Hear the happy feet dancing to the beat of the Freddie. Running all around. That's how it is, girl. That's how it is. Yeah, yeah. Went to see my honey today at the house.
So Courtney had some success writing for some other artists, but he couldn't find the chart success for himself. He did a song called I Watched You Slowly Slip Away in 1965, and at this point, when that failed, he made a change. So Courtney decided to change his writing partner. He chose Robert Bateman. Now, if Bateman's name is familiar to you, he's the guy that co-wrote the song Please Mr. Postman. And in 1966, the landscape of soul music was starting to change a little bit. 65 saw some big changes with James Brown's work. And before Brown got into actual funk, you had some guys kind of in the middle doing a little bit of that as well, or on the verge of funk. And Courtney is one of those guys. And he and Bateman started writing more danceable songs as opposed to soul ballads. So Courtney switched to the label Riverside Records, and his first single was called Skate Now. Now this was aimed specifically at the dance crowd, at a dance audience, and this was the beginning of his new sound.
Hey, the hippies from the city, y'all getting down to the nitty-gritty. I got to stay now.
So Skate Now charted well at the R&B charts. It hit number 13 and 71 on the pop charts. So he started to gain a little bit of popularity here, and they recorded an album. So this album called Now Shingling, this is a pricey one. And as you can see, this is Courtney, both pictures. I guess he loved both outfits so much, he said, I'm going to put both of the pictures on the cover here. So this album is basically it's very much dance oriented, and focusing on the two hot dances of the day, the Boogaloo and the Shingling, which I think are kind of the same type of dance. This is somewhat of a lavish gatefold here. This album, I'm surprised they spent this kind of money on somewhat of an unknown performer. And this is a real expensive record to buy. In fact, this was bought by a friend of mine for me, and this was still sealed. And you know, I'm sorry, but I had to open it up and play it because it's so good. And some of the liner notes in here are very interesting. It talks about him and his partnership with Robert Bateman, and talks about how his single Skate Now was a big hit at the Apollo Theater in Harlem and the Regal Theater in Chicago. So they talk a little bit about soul and what soul is all about, and then Lou Courtney is soul. They're really selling them here, and this album is a very interesting album for a couple of reasons. The dance numbers are wonderful. I'm going to play you a few of them right here, focusing on those dance numbers I talked about earlier, Shingling and Boogaloo.
You think you're so hip and out of sight, but I've got just the thing, girl. A new dance called a shingling. Don't you know there's a new thing going round, and it's putting all the other dances down. What about me and you? Yeah, yeah, doing the boogaloo now, baby. We gon' pose. Now we gon' pose. Ow, ow, ow. Do the thing, Jerry.
Now, when he's not working on dance numbers and getting all sweaty, I mean, this is a very high energy album, and Courtney does not disappoint. There are a couple other non-dance numbers that are a little bit more just pop numbers that are really excellent songs. One is The Man Is Lonely, and the other one is I Can Always Tell.
The man is lonely, the man is lonely, he needs a woman bad. Said I can always tell when the hand is coming, baby.
So Lou Courtney is really an all-around performer, and although he sticks mostly to the dance stuff on here, he's a instrumentalist as well as a writer. He's a pianist, he plays keyboards, he plays drums, and what else does he play here? Organ, some other percussion instruments. So another thing that's somewhat interesting about this record is that he ventures into psychedelia a little bit here with a song called Psychedelics Shingling. So they actually use the term psychedelic, and this is a mid-67 album. And combining that with soul was rather unusual for the time. So the Psychedelic Shingling sounds a little bit like Booker T and the MGs on acid. So there was another single released from this album called Do the Thing. That charted at number 17 on the R&B charts and number 80 on the pop charts. And then there was a non-LP single called You Ain't Ready, which hit 46 on the R&B charts. What came after this was another non-album single, and this is the song I grew up with. It's a song called Hey Joyce. And this is one of those just hot funk dance numbers that actually did chart, number 43 on the R&B chart. And I grew up with this one. My buddy, we were real young. I must have been 5 years old, and we had this song, and we sometimes would play it at 78 speed. But we really liked the song. Years went by. I could never find this. It took me about 30 years to find this record. I was reintroduced to Lou Courtney at that time. But this song has been sampled as well several times and has made a little bit of a comeback. You can buy it now as a download, but I'm going to play the song for you right now.
Hey Joyce, you're my choice, baby. Hey Joyce, I must have loved you, girl, for oh so long.
Guaranteed to set your record player on fire. Love that song. Now, Lou Courtney would do one more single on pop side, and that was called If the Shoe Fits. And this is another good dance number. You know, he's always got good high energy. He uses guitars, and that's something you don't see in a lot of soul music in the 60s. That's one of the reasons I like the song It's Your Thing by the Isley Brothers. It's got some driving guitar in it. And Courtney does the same.
Told you how. Come over here, baby. Sit down, listen to me. I'm looking for a girl with that outside smile that likes to party and dress sharp. And if
he left Riverside and Popside and moved over to Verve Records. And sticking with the dance numbers, he did a song called "Do the Horse," and that was this one did not chart. Verve Records is kind of a strange place for him to wind up, a soul dance guy, but for whatever reason, that's where he was. And this song did not chart. The B-side, though, is just an absolute killer song called "Rubberneckin' Chick Checkin'."
And you can't be shy when you ask for her name. You got to have yourself together, or she'll blow your game. She'll be picking all the choosers and overlooking all the losers. Just rub her neck, yeah. Long chick checking.
The next single for Verve was called "You Can Give Your Love to Me," and more of a high-energy love song. Courtney's vocals, you know, he's a very passionate singer, and this is a great song that also did not chart.
And if it's at all permissible, baby, will you give your love to me? Ooh, yeah. I'm gonna give your love to me, baby. I need it so bad.
So Lou Courtney kept moving. He went to yet another label. He went to the Buddha label, which is just as unlikely of a label, I think, for a soul singer as Verve was. And he did "Let Me Turn You On," and that was 1969. Next that came up about a year later was this one called "Hot Butter and All." This is just probably his heaviest funk song, and it's a two-parter. The B-side is the part 2 of the song, and let me just play it for you.
I told him I was the best, and I said I was better than all of the rest. You wouldn't believe me, said you gotta show me, honey. So I put my thing on her, so bad it was funny. I put the popcorn on her. Listen to me, y'all. I put the popcorn on, hot butter and all.
So collectors refer to this song, "Hot Butter and All," as a soul funk masterpiece, and it's on this little tiny hurdy-gurdy label here that I'd never heard of before, and it's no wonder it didn't get much play, but it's a lot of his singles are just very highly sought after. The album here probably goes for over $100 in really good condition, and a couple of these singles like "Hey Joyce," I've seen that for $100 in really good shape. "Hot Butter and All" is another tough one to get, and you might find that one in the $100 range as well. So at this point, he had a bit of a break from the industry a little bit and reformed. Eventually, he started doing some more soul music into the 70s. And in 1976, this album came out called "Buffalo Smoke."
I wouldn't believe the truth was true. No, baby, I had to receive the proof from you.
So this album is actually, it's pretty good. I mean, it's more disco-y, you know, it's more 70s soul. It's not an expensive one. You can probably find this for about $10 or so. If you do happen to come across it, I would pick it up. And because he's just a very good singer and interprets his songs all very well. As the 70s progressed, he wound up in a late version of The Fifth Dimension, and he appears on this album. Now by this time, this is 1978, Billy Davis Jr. and Marilyn McCoo had left the band, and he had taken the place really of Billy Davis Jr. And this album didn't really render any hits. He did have one writing credit on here, and I've listened to it, and it's not very good. I'm a big Fifth Dimension fan. This is not really part of the regular catalog. I mean, if you're a completist, I'd pick it up, but it's one I think you could pass over. The reason I have it is only because of Lou Courtney. So at that point, I think he kind of retired, because I don't know if he did any recording after that. He might have been doing some behind-the-scenes things in the 70s, but unfortunately, he's relatively unknown. So Lou Courtney is one of these guys that I discovered as a kid and never quite got him out of my brain. And he's one of these, the reason I started this channel was to focus on guys like this, because I think they just have just some great material. He's a fine artist and just didn't get the recognition that some of his peers got, and that happens to a lot of people, but I wanted to focus on him today and give him a little bit of love because I think he's that good. I hope you like the spotlight on Lou Courtney. There's a lot of other obscure artists coming and some very popular ones too here on the channel, so make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when I have a new video out. See you next time here on Pop Goes the 60s.